What's up guys, this is Voxide and welcome to a new After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial we're gonna be creating this nice horror intro sequence. So let's get started. Let's create a new composition. And I'm making this composition 200 frames long and full HD, so 1080p, and hit OK. Let's start by making a new solid, so that's Ctrl Y, and I will name this background. And for this guy I'm gonna go ahead and add a noise and grain, fractal noise. Go inside the transform for the fractal noise and turn off uniform scaling and just increase the height for this and maybe decrease the width so we get this stretched out fractal noise look. And we can always go back and change this, but maybe something like this should be fine for now. And let's create some masks for this, and I will start off by just double clicking while having the ellipse tool selected. So if you double click this, it will create a mask, and you can see it created a shape layer, and I want to create the mask for this background layer. So just click your background layer, so make sure it's selected, double click your ellipse tool, and this will just add a ellipse mask to it. And you can turn on the mask toggle to see your points, and I can go ahead and change these points now individually. And if I press F, I can go to my feather options and feather this out. And I'm gonna go ahead and select the ellipse tool, and with the ellipse tool selected I will start in the center, and if I hold Ctrl and Shift, you can see we're creating a perfect sphere that's coming right from the center. And actually let's undo this, and I only want to hold Ctrl down because I don't want this to be a perfect circle. So I'm gonna go with a shape that looks something like this, and feather this out. And now with the layer selected, I can press T twice, and this will give me my opacity for the masks. And for my mask 1, I want to decrease the opacity for this. And let's press F for feather and feather our second mask. And you can kind of see the effect we're creating here. So I want a bit more light towards the center, and I want it to be fading out towards the edges. And let's press T twice again, and maybe even decrease this even more. And this should be alright. Let's go ahead and actually add a curves effect to this, and I will just lower my RGB scale down and maybe increase the contrast just a bit. So something like this should be fine. And I'm gonna go ahead and press T and just decrease the whole opacity for this layer down to maybe 50%. And I'll go back in my masks here and maybe increase the opacity for my first mask a bit. And this should be fine for now. And now I'll go ahead and drop my logo image in the composition. And I'm gonna go ahead and pre-compose this layer, so Ctrl Shift C, and I'll name this logo holder, and step inside this composition now. And for this guy I want to go ahead and go to my effects, stylize, and find edges, and I will set the find edges to invert. Now going back inside my comp 1, I can set this logo holder now to be screen. And let's go ahead and add a camera to this composition now, so new layer camera. And I'm gonna use a camera with an angle of view of 75 degrees. Hit OK to create camera. And let's make our layers. So press F4 and let's turn these layers into 3D layers. And let's start animating our camera, and I will go in my transfer properties, set a keyframe for the position at where it's at frame 0. Move over to frame 200 and just increase the Z value of this position, so the last value. And I'm just sort of creating this slight zoom in. And what I want to do with this background layer is I'm actually going to go for the position of this layer, and I'm going to push this layer in Z space, so I'm just going to increase the last value for the position. And then I can rescale this back up so it fits the screen, and this will sort of create a parallaxing effect. As you can see, the camera is getting closer to the logo before it gets closer to the background, and this is creating this nice parallax effect. And I'm gonna make a quick RAM preview to see if the speed of the camera zoom is alright. So this might be a little too slow, so what I can do is go to my beginning frame and adjust the first keyframe for the position, and I'm just gonna push this in Z space a bit, just so it starts from a lower value, so it has more room to animate. And now I can readjust the scale for this background layer. And let's grab our logo holder and also increase the scale for this guy. And let's preview this. Alright, so slightly better, but I think this background layer needs to be pushed out even more. So I'm just gonna go ahead and adjust the position for this guy and just push it even more in Z space. And now rescale this and let's preview. Alright, so now you can see that the camera is affecting the background layer behind our logo even less and creating more of a parallaxing effect. And now we can go ahead and create our particles. So I will create a new solid. I will name this particle and I will add an effect, simulation, and CC particle world. And I will solo this. And inside my particle world option, I can go to grid and guides, and I will disable all of these settings except for the position. So I want to be able to grab the position null and just place our particles around. And now I'm gonna set a keyframe for birthrate at frame 0. So set the keyframe for birthrate, and if you press U, this will show you your keyframe information, and I will go forward one frame and set this birthrate to 0. So what this will do is create this sort of exploding effect. And if I go to longevity, I will set this to be maybe 10. So this will result in a 10 seconds duration, which will be enough to fill the entire composition. And let's go to producer. And I'm not gonna worry about the producer settings for now. Let's step inside physics and let's set all of these settings to 0. So now we're creating just these frozen particles. And now I can go to producer settings and increase the radius for X and Y and also a bit for Z. And if I go in my particle settings and set the particle type to shaded sphere and scroll through my timeline, you can see now the effect that we are getting. Let's step inside opacity map and I will just create a straight line here, just because I don't need any fading in the beginning or the end. And you can see we're getting sort of this flickering animation, and I think this is because I'm using After Effects CS6. So when you preview your particles, you might get some sort of glitches, and you can get rid of this by changing your viewport resolution to maybe half. And now you can see everything works as it should. I'm gonna go ahead and set the color map to be origin constant. And this will just make our particles white throughout the whole composition. And let's actually create more particles. So I'll go back to my birthrate settings and I will change the rate to be maybe 5 or 6. And you can see this just creates more particles. And now I can simply use this positional to reposition our particles wherever you want inside the scene. And I also want to make these particles a little smaller, so I can go ahead and set the birth and depth size to maybe 0.05. And let's unsolo this. And now you can see how it looks with the logo and the background. Let's go to my producer settings and I will set the radius Z. So I'll spread this out on the Z axis a bit more, just so it creates more of a 3D feel. And I also think I need more particles, so let's go back to our rate and set this to 12. So I'm gonna be using this layer as a base to fill out our whole screen with different types of particles. So I will rename this to particles small. And I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this layer. And for my second layer, I will just drag this over maybe to the other corner. Somewhere around this place should be fine. And let's go inside my rate here and change the rate to maybe 25. So just add more particles And you can also go to your extra settings and you can change the random seed here if you want a different look for your particles. And let's duplicate this layer again. And for my third layer, I will just drag this over maybe over here. So now I will duplicate this layer, and this layer I'm going to use to create our blurry particles. So I'll rename this layer to particles blur. Let's reposition this for now, maybe in this corner. And I will go ahead and go to my particle settings, and I know I want to increase the scale for this, so maybe 0.5 and 0.5 should be fine. Drag this over. And I can go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, and choose Camera Lens Blur. And now if I turn the radius up, you can see we're sort of creating this nice hexagonal look, which only Camera Lens Blur can create. So it's really important that you use Camera Lens Blur and not the standard Fast Blur to create this nice hexagonal shape. And let's go ahead for this layer and set the birth rate to maybe 10. So I don't need as much particles. So this seems to be looking fine. And for this layer I will actually set the opacity to 50%. And now I can duplicate this layer, go to my particle world, and let's reposition these guys. And for this layer I will set the opacity to maybe something lower, so 35%. Or maybe even 25. Maybe I can even increase the blur radius. And I will duplicate this layer and move these guys maybe to the other corner down below. And let's actually just go to my extra settings and change the random seed for this. And place them below. And maybe increase the opacity for this. And now I will duplicate this layer, and this layer I'm going to use to create our glowing particles. So I will rename this to particles glow, set the opacity back to 100% and get rid of my camera lens blur. And I'll move this guy over to the other side maybe. Maybe around here, and I'm going to decrease the size for these particles. So let's step inside my birth size, and I'm gonna use a value of 0.25. And actually I'll set the size lower, so maybe 0.125. So I'm just splitting the previous value in half, and this should be alright. And I'll go ahead and go to Effect, Generate Fill, and set this fill to be a nice orange. And go ahead and add a stylize glow, and right away I will duplicate this glow, and for the second layer of glow I will just increase the radius and decrease the threshold maybe, and make sure this layer of particles, so the particles glow layer, is set to add. And I'll go ahead and duplicate this and grab this guy and just move it over and create some glowing particles on the other side as well. And let's grab any of these particle layers, and I will just duplicate this guy, drag it over on top. I will rename this to particle smoke, and I will leave this as 50% opacity, and I'll grab this and move it over to the side. And let's get rid of the camera lens blur, and I'll solo this for now. And let's increase the rate here to maybe 25. And in my particle tab I want to increase the size here, so I'll use a value of 2 or maybe a value of 1, and change the particle type to faded sphere. And let's actually set the birth rate to something even higher, so maybe 50, and increase the size to 1.5. And I will go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, add a fast blur, and just blur this out. Make sure repeat edge pixel is checked, and if I unsolo this, I will set this to screen and maybe lower the opacity to 35, and this will sort of be our smoke layer. And I'll duplicate this and move this over to the side, so we have a little bit of a smoke on the other side as well. And maybe the opacity for these layers is too high, so I'll just set them to 25 and maybe 15. So now our next step will be to create the light leaks. So I'll make a new layer. Let's rename this to light leaks. And I'll go ahead and add a noise, fractional noise. I'll set the contrast to maybe 50 and complexity to 2. Go to our transform options and increase the scale for this, and maybe decrease the brightness. And let's go ahead and add a fast blur to this and just blur this out. And also make sure repeat edge pixels is turned on. And if I set this layer to screen, I can go ahead and add a color correction tritone, and let's use a orange. And now I can decrease the brightness even more maybe. Let's set this orange to have a more of a reddish tint. And I'll go ahead and add a expression to the evolution. So hold Alt and left click your stopwatch for evolution. And the expression will be time multiplied by, let's say, 350. And I'll solo this layer for now and see if the animation speed is good. So I think this is alright. And I can see that the scale needs to be even higher. And maybe even more blur. Alright, so something like this. And I'll go ahead and press T for opacity and set the opacity to maybe 25%. And I will also add a wiggle expression to the opacity property. So type wiggle, and in between parentheses I will type 2, comma, and let's try maybe a value of 35. So 2 will be the frequency, which is the first value, and the second value will be your amplitude, which is the intensity. And let's preview this. So this should be looking fine, and let's unsolo this now. So now we have our light leaks, and let's go ahead and create our text layer. So at frame 100 I will cut this logo holder layer, and I'll go ahead and grab my text tool and type our text. And I will go ahead and pre-compose this text layer, so Ctrl-Shift-C, and I will rename this to text holder. And I will set the text holder layer to start right at frame 100, which is where the logo ends. Let's step inside the text holder comp, and let's make sure that our text is centered. So if you hold Ctrl and Shift while repositioning your layer, you can see that it will snap to center, and this will align it perfectly in the center. And now back inside my main comp, I can turn this text holder layer into a 3D comp. And I will go ahead and make this background layer maybe even less opaque, so lower the opacity to maybe 35%. And maybe even drop the opacity for the text holder to 80%. And I'll go ahead and do the same thing for our logo holder, press T, and maybe for this guy I will set the opacity to 75%. Or maybe 85%. And now let's set up our vertical shake, and I will add a new adjustment layer and rename this layer to vertical shake. And I will add an effect, distort transform, to this. And you can see now if I go in my position settings, I can use this value to create our shake. The only problem here is that if you use a high enough value, you can see that your composition sort of leaves the bounds and creates this ugly black border around it. And one way to fix this, let's just reset this, is if you add a stylize motion tile. I'll set the motion tile to be on top of our transform, turn on mirror edges, and for my output height I will set this to be 150. And whenever I adjust the position now, you can see that we are sort of having this mirrored effect. And now we can go ahead and set up the shake. So let's reset this. So the way I'm going to set up this shake is by using a wiggle expression, and I want to use this wiggle expression only on the second value of this position property, so this guy over here. And one way that we can do this is if I add an effect, expression controls slider control, I will rename this to wiggle, and you don't have to rename this, but just for the sake of keeping things organized, I will rename this to wiggle, and I will add the wiggle expression to this slider value over here. So Alt and click to add your expression, and I will type wiggle, open and end parentheses, and in between parentheses I will type, let's try maybe 5 and 15, or maybe 55 for now. And going back in my transform properties, I will link the second value of this position property to this slider value over here. So I will go ahead and add an expression, Alt and left click, and the expression will be value plus open bracket 0, comma, and now I will use the pick whip to select my slider value, and now I will close the bracket, and now you can see our second value of the position is being affected by the wiggle, and we are creating this nice shake. And I will disable the particle layers for now, just to be able to preview this faster. Alright, so here we have our shake, and let's go back inside our shake layer. So now I want to be able to turn this shake on and off by using keyframes. And one way that I can do this is if I add another expression controls slider control, and this will be my wiggle amplitude. And essentially what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna link the second value of this wiggle, so 55 in this case. I'm gonna link this second value to another slider control, which I can then animate in time. So let's get rid of this 55 over here, and I will use the pick whip to choose the slider value. And now if I set the amplitude to 55, which it was previously, you can see we're still creating this nice shake. And now what I can do is actually animate this shake to turn on and off. So if I make a keyframe for the wiggle amplitude at frame 0 at 100, go forward maybe to frame 20 and set this to 0. And if I preview this now, you can see that we have the shake in the beginning, and then it slowly fades out towards frame 20. And I'm also going to increase the frequency for this shake, so I can go to my wiggle expression and set the first value, which is the frequency value, from 5 to 15. And now this will make our shake be much faster. Okay, so maybe that's a little too much, so let's set this back to 10, so the first value. And maybe 7.5. So that's looking fine. Let's make this end a little faster, so I will move this keyframe over to maybe frame 12. So this will be my initial shake, or actually let's move it forward to maybe frame 16, and let's use a higher value here, so maybe 150. And let's preview this with the particle layers. Alright, and what I can do now is simply animate the shakes by using this wiggle amplitude property. So I can go to maybe frame 60 or 55, set another keyframe for 0, move over one frame forward and set another keyframe for maybe a value of 70, move over a few more frames and set it back to 0. So now you can see we're instantly creating some shakes wherever you want. And I will create another shake at frame 100, where the transition happens between the logo and the text. So set another keyframe, make another keyframe for maybe 150, move over a few frames, set it back to 0, and let's set another shake maybe around this place. So 75 for this guy and back to 0. So let's take care of that bright flash layer, and I will make a new solid for this, and I'll name this flash. Go ahead and add a noise and grain fractal noise to this. Go to my transform properties and turn off uniform scaling, and let's increase the height and maybe decrease the scale width. I will set the complexity to maybe 12, and I'll go ahead and add a color correction tritone to this. And for the midtone I will use a orange, and I'll also add a color correction curves and just increase the contrast just so we get a little bit more yellow in between. And I'm gonna go ahead and animate the evolution for this, so Alt and left click to create an expression, and the expression will be time multiplied by maybe 5000. So I want this to move really fast. And let's set this layer to add, And I will also add a stylize glow to this. And let's increase the glow radius and maybe decrease the threshold a bit. And I will animate the brightness for this. So let's set the keyframe for brightness of 0 and move over maybe 10 frames. And let's decrease the brightness until the whole layer disappears completely. So negative 100. And this is how I sort of created that flash. And if I select this layer and press U, this will give me my keyframe information, and also press U for this layer. And now wherever there's a shake, I can animate the brightness for the flash. So set another keyframe for the brightness and maybe increase this brightness a bit where the shaking occurs. Set this back to negative 100. So now you can see wherever there's a bit of flash, I'm kind of syncing it with the shake. And do the same thing here. Set another keyframe. Let's increase the brightness and decrease it back to negative 100. And you can do the same for the final flash. And I'm going to place this flash layer below our vertical shake. So the vertical shake also affects this flash layer. Alright, and one final thing that we need to add is let's make a new adjustment layer. And this will be our vertical blur. And I'm just going to add a blur and sharpen fast blur and set the fast blur to vertical and just animate the vertical blurriness and repeat edge pixels. And I can time this with the shake as well. So let's make another keyframe here for 0. And now we're also sort of giving it some blur. So let's turn on all of our layers now and see what we created. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching so far. In case I missed anything, be sure to check out the original project files by following the link in the description of this video. If you learned anything new, make sure to drop a like, subscribe for more tutorials, and I'm out.